I trained as a nurse, and when I was nursing in the very early 60s, of course, abortion was still illegal, and no one talked about sexuality. And parents didn't talk, there was nothing in the schools. Well, maybe the girls got something around menstruation while the boys went out and played dodgeball. And so I met a lot of patients who were ill, some of whom died, because they didn't have the knowledge that they needed to either recognize a sexual health problem, or they were too embarrassed to come to the doctor with that problem. And I was overwhelmed with sadness because, of course, I didn't know anything about sexuality either until I went into nursing. And I've always been a real advocate for people having knowledge. And it just seemed to me to be so unfair to lose your life or alter it dramatically because somebody hadn't told you something that should be common knowledge.
I was born in Vancouver, and my experiences were very sheltered. I had no sexual health education in elementary school, and I went to a boys' private school for junior high and senior high, and there was none there at all. We had a nurse, but that was it. She put Band-Aids on, and I had a talk with my father, which was uncomfortable. He and I still laugh about it, and I had no sisters, and so I was completely ignorant.
I don't remember very much about sex ed education. No, I don't. Tried, no, I can't.
It mostly focused around Degrassi High videos, and then a little bit of a talk, mostly the teacher talking about the moral of the story in the video. So by no means do I feel like that was adequate.
I don't remember anything about it, so it didn't really have an impact on me, and I think that might have been just because I was too focused on trying to survive or figure my own stuff out.
The beginnings of sex ed in BC had to do with preventing the spread of venereal disease. That was a huge public health concern in the 1920s and earlier. And so sex ed in BC meant warning young people, typically high school students, really only about the dangers of their bodies, the dangers of sexuality. It entered the schools through the doctors, and they brought with it, you know, the scientific legitimacy that made it more palatable for educators. So, but they had a hard time to convince educators that doctors shouldn't be doing it. It should be, you know, teachers who are trained in sex ed.
The school nurse came into the room and they had all the girls, no boys at all. And I guess my question to her was something about what happened to the egg if, you know, when it fell out of the body, because the way they depicted it in the film was this enormous egg going down the fallopian tube and out through the body. And my fear was that I was going to be, you know, walking down the street or standing in the classroom and this big egg would come splatting out and land on the ground. So I lived in fear for quite a while about what was going to happen with the egg.
We watched it was Disney characters. I remember this very, very, very clearly. It was Disney characters like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Pluto, and they were explaining menstruation. And so that was my sex ed was Pluto talking about uteruses. It was very, very weird.
I really think the whole concept of age-appropriate messaging is really important as well. So I think what you would say to a 4 or 5-year-old would lay the foundations. You know, if you were really being intentional about giving a child a really good basic education about their sexuality, it'd start when they're verbal and when they start looking at their body as something that they own and is separate from their parents.
So for example, in the primary grades, it's so important that kids learn that they are the boss of their bodies, that they know technical terminology for their body parts, especially referring to the reproductive system, and that they understand that they can say who goes on their body and who does not. Really, this is abuse prevention, but it's a general safety issue.
And then as they get older and see more of the world and have more experience, their questions and their needs are going to be different, and they'll start to wonder about things like human reproduction and where does it all fit and where did I come from and so on.
And then their body is changing sometimes at such a fast rate, they don't even recognize themselves. So what we can do is really make sure they understand what those changes are about and talk about it in a really positive, open, healthy way, so that when these changes occur and when their body changes, they know that it's just a healthy, natural part of growing up, and actually it's a really good thing. When kids are in the later part of elementary school, like in grades 6 and 7, and then moving on to high school, the focus on the more physical aspects of sexuality needs to switch to the more emotional aspects of sexuality. So with this age group, we need to be discussing what does a healthy relationship look like? What does it not look like? How do you express your own personal boundaries within these relationships? And what do you do if someone isn't very respectful of your boundaries? We need to talk about the pressures that society places on young people, really people of any age, to be in a relationship, and that it's okay to be single.
The focus was always on information. What I saw being ignored was privacy, because these are intimate conversations, and these conversations need to take place usually in small groups of people you trust. And it has to be within this context of safety that this information gets talked about.
You need to be in a safe space when you're learning about sex, be it like, even if you like didn't have like a whole weird like taboo like life upbringing, you still need to be in a safe place with people that you trust to learn about something in depth like that, I feel. Well, at least for me. And Camp Out was that safe place. Like, everyone was super nice. Everyone was super, there was no cliquing. I didn't feel cliquing at all. I could talk to everybody. Everybody said hi to me. We had these happy envelopes, and everybody said you were lovable, you're capable. And that's what you need to hear when you're having sex ed, that you're lovable and capable. Isn't that what everyone's wondering about, you know? Like, they're not wondering about like, oh, I need to like put on the condom this way instead of this way because it's bad. Like, people will figure that out. Like, it just takes a little experience. Like, I think one thing people need to teach in sex ed is that the first time sex, y'all. And you need to know that the first time ain't gonna be perfect. There's gonna be moments where you're just like, buddy, hey, like, slow down a second, because that doesn't feel very nice. And people need to teach that that's normal. And Camp Out taught me that, and I had people that were there who said the same things, who had the same feelings that I've had, who weren't afraid of sharing them because it was safe. So Camp Out was like the epitome of what I think sex ed should be.
I think it's sometimes surprising for people to hear that I have had death threats, so have some of my colleagues.
Information that came in some of the right-wing publications where my name was mentioned as a proponent of sex education and somebody who was out there teaching kids how to be promiscuous and so on. So that definitely did happen. There were times when I felt like I was pretty well in a bullseye.
90% of the parents are completely supportive of what I do. About 5% may have some questions, and they want to learn about what I propose to teach their kids because they know it's important, but they're not quite sure how to get their head around it. And then from time to time, I come across parents who are opposed to teaching their children sexual health education, and I find that this mostly comes out of fear.
Well, for instance, over the years, a number of fathers have come to me after a presentation and said they thought that was the most wonderful thing they had ever seen, and where were you when I needed you? And then they'll say something like, you know, my wife twisted my arm and made me come tonight. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it because I couldn't imagine how you were going to do it without making it pornographic. And that speaks volumes about where they got their education and the guilt that they feel around that.
What do we do if parents are very uncomfortable with somebody speaking to their kids about this? I mean, this happens everywhere, so I don't want to just say ethnic people are going through this. But in my community, you did not talk about it. You did not even talk about the safety of it. You did not even talk about condoms. And these are very difficult conversations to have in public school when you could be sitting in a classroom as a teacher with kids who might be all from a community of faith, and you're trying to talk to them about sexuality. That's very difficult to do. But I always believe that within our own groups, within our own isolated communities sometimes, we need to have these conversations before students enter the mainstream.
I always tried to say to a student group that I know there's a range of beliefs in this classroom and I appreciate them all. And so you have the right to question what I'm saying, and you have the right to, not act on anything that I'm talking about. And the choice not to be sexually active is a very good one for people who don't want to take any chances at all.
The question box is an anonymous box that students are allowed to put in any question at all. And they are told that, except for a few exceptions, all questions will be answered. And those questions, anonymous, have become probably the best vehicle for moving sexual health education beyond the 1 day, 2-hour session. That the questions are so varied, they are so heartfelt, that any teacher can see that this is one of the most important things to the young people they're teaching. And so they either get as many questions answered as possible in a short period of time, or they find themselves week after week answering question after question after question.
Why are there so many myths about sex? Is masturbation an okay hobby? How old are kids when they get their first boyfriends and girlfriends? And then in brackets they put, be specific.
They're very normal questions about the use of a particular body part. What is the prostate for? What are street terms? They have lots of, there are many street terms, so they ask the meaning of them. The one that hit me when I went back to the classroom was, what are friends with benefits? I had no idea what friends with benefits are. I had to say, luckily I had previewed the questions and I had to phone up someone and find out what that was.
Is it true that the ocean is salty because of whale sperm?
My best story is I came into my classroom and the 7th grade girl had found the question box, which was kept in a cupboard when it wasn't being used, and she was pulling out questions and had a group of other students around, and they were answering the questions.
What should I do if I'm in a love triangle? I've heard that a man kisses the woman's breast during sex. What does that do?
You'll find also, if you do teach this to the same group of children year after year, those usually younger kids sit and listen and then start to doodle. And within a year, they're the ones asking the questions intently because this is now happening to them. And they're now interested.
Yoo-hoo! Jenny thinks that she has the key to popularity, parking in cars with the boys at night.
I was kind of like the bad girl in high school or something. I was, sleeping around quite a bit.
Girls who park in cars are not really popular. Not even with the boys they park with.
I don't think the women or the girls were terribly bad with it, but the boys that went to high school were very judgmental and rude and liked to sort of smirk or laugh when you passed by and so on and so forth. And I was just feeling like, hey, I'm just expressing my sexuality, and if you think there's something wrong with what I'm doing, but it hurt, of course. But there you go. I was on my own little quest.
I know there's a lot of sort of stereotypical views and perspectives on what a Roman Catholic girls' school is like, and how we sort of, I wouldn't so much say are promiscuous, but teach ourselves things because of the suppressive nature of it all. Well, there's stereotypes for a reason, and that's very much what happened in the boarding school I was raised in. So we didn't have a lot of education when it came to sex per se, but we taught each other things which were not accurate. You know, we engaged in activities, I think, because it was taboo, if you will.
In British Columbia, there's a whole series of textbooks beginning really, you know, even before the 1920s. They're never labeled history, you know, sex ed. They're often labeled things like how to be healthy or wholesome living, or they're sort of these codes for learning how to understand the body. Really early approaches in these textbooks pretty much focused on lessons, very, very limited notions of lessons around anatomy, biology, often barnyard stories. This is how the younger kids were taught. It was really about animals and plants. And so the hope was that the kids would take those animal and plant stories and somehow make the leap to human sexuality.
I have 2 daughters, and I will tell you that my wife had the talks with our daughters. But they understood how often I was called upon as a teacher and as a curriculum developer to work on this. And so the discussions around our house were very open about sexuality and growing up.
Being a parent as a sexual health educator is tremendously challenging. Saul Gordon was a very, very famous sexual health educator in the United States, and Saul said the hardest people for us sexual health educators to teach are the ones who live at our house. We have so many expectations and so many emotions wrapped up in our own children. What I used to do with the books is say to them, I've got this book for work and I'm wondering if you could read it and tell me whether you think it's worthwhile or not. Would other kids your age like it? And then that way I would get all kinds of knowledge into them without them realizing. If I just brought a book home and said, here, read this, they'd say, I'm not reading any more of your perverted books.
I truly believe that the discussions, the normalizing of puberty, of who we are sexually, is a great freeing thing. So that when it comes down to the most difficult parts, which I believe is building good, healthy relationships, we can get over the embarrassing part and get on to figuring out who we are and who we are with our partners.
I remember another story with my younger daughter, who was about 3, maybe 3.5, and we're watching hockey, and she came and she jumped in my lap. Now, I sort of, it hurt, and Elishba looked at me and said, oh, sorry, Baba, I didn't mean to crush your penis. Now, at that moment, I thought, wow, here's this child, this little child, who it wouldn't matter if she crushed my elbow or my penis, but she's so open to just saying, well, penis is another body part, so I'm sorry, I crushed your penis. And that created in our family this sense that you can say anything about sexuality in an open, honest, non-judgmental way and have this be very acceptable without any shame, without any guilt.
I think the most important thing for youth to know about sexual health is that whoever says no is the ruler. And what we need so much more than we've had in the past is communication skills, so that they can talk with each other and negotiate whether they're going to be sexually active or not.
It's really different if you're a young kid who grows up understanding consent and understanding boundaries around your body and another person's body, and having that knowledge integrated throughout your sex education experience, your your interactions with peers in gym class, you know, any kind of thing, that kid, when this person is starting to become a sexually active person, is going to relate to their partners really, really differently than someone for whom that wasn't a big message growing up, and who is mostly copying what they see modeled for them on television and music videos and movies and their peers.
One of the best questions that was ever asked was a young girl who asked, what do I say if a boy phones me up and asks me out for a date? And as the teachers in the classroom went on about how positive this was, and told her how to accept and how to, you know, how to make sure that her parents understood and that she felt comfortable going on this date. And then the little girl interrupted us 5 minutes into our diatribe and said, I want to say no. How do I say no? And so those were the questions, the types of questions that I think are becoming more and more important about sexual health.
I was teaching in a grade 10 classroom and I had a new student in my class. I won't use a real name, I'll just use a name, Bob. I was a homeroom teacher and all the students were to come to me to get their schedule for the semester. Well, Bob did not show up. When the class left the room and the 7-minute break between class, this person walks into my class, clearly what I thought was a girl. The girl approaches my desk and says, I'm new to your school, Mr. Here. I need my course schedule. And I looked at the girl, who I thought was a girl, and I said, I don't have your schedule. I have this one here, and it's obviously not you. The person, the girl, who I thought was a girl, says to me, can I see that, please? And they said, it's mine, I'm Bob. That experience of looking at a body with long-haired, manicured fingernails, and somebody whose name was a boy's name and a body that did not fit really rocked me as a teacher. I did not know what to do. I was angry that nobody informed me what was going on. I had no idea what the protocol would be. I remember when Bob left the class, sitting there thinking, Bob has PE this semester. I had looked at the schedule. Where is Bob going to change? And my investigation with my principal, the counselors, the student was identified as First Nations. So I went to some of the First Nations counseling also. And nobody knew what to do. And that was very sad to me. That seemed like an injustice, a quiet injustice that sort of will continue and will continue to linger. And so Bob goes through school in the shadows, spending lunch hours in the First Nations counseling office, walking very, very close to the lockers, eating lunch alone, not participating in some of the sports activities, the intramurals, the cultural activities of the school. And that experience has always stayed with me. So I try to inform myself, but my goal would be for having all teachers in this province learn a little bit more about gender, sexuality, and how it manifests itself in our hallways and in our classrooms.